I know, things are a little crazy now, huh? You want to sit up on my desk? There you go. There's no food up there. Have a seat. Lay down. Okay, fine. You're gonna growl at me? At the very least, why don't you just hang out? Hang out on my lap. Be a lap dog. Just hang out on my lap. No.
About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know.
So I want to share 3 stories with you guys. The first story took place in college. I was a senior, I was about to graduate, and I wanted to go to graduate school. And so I went to one of my political science professors to ask him for recommendations of schools that I could apply to. And he said that I should apply to the Kennedy School at Harvard. And I was like, what? The Kennedy School? Me? You're kidding, right? I'll get eaten alive at the Kennedy School. I can't go to Harvard. People like me don't go to Harvard. Back in 1991, you only had your community. I didn't know anyone from my neighborhood that went to Harvard, so I didn't apply. Now I know that I would have kicked their ass at the Kennedy School, but back then I was dealing with something. Second story is from a couple years ago. EduCause, which is this national conference for CIOs in higher education, was having one of their big events. And they reached out to me personally to ask me to be a featured speaker at the event. I said yes, the event came. I went the day before to check out the venue, check out the space, and I walked in and it was this gigantic, massive room with at least 1,000 seats in it. This was not the keynote, this was just a featured speaker. And I'm like, why do they have such a huge room? There's absolutely nobody's gonna show up to this. I was gonna go out to the street and pay people $5 to come sit. So I had people in the audience. The next day, I was up on stage, I looked out, every single seat was taken. There were people lined up against the wall. And the third story is just from a couple weeks ago. I've been working with this CEO from the startup with a really cool idea that we'll talk about at some point, but I like what they're working on. I think they're impacting the right group, and it's Jennifer. Hey, what's going on? What story was I telling? Oh yeah, the third story. He wanted me to be more involved, and he wanted me to meet with the CFO from New York City who happened to be coming to Phoenix. He wanted to grab dinner and talk about the future. And I remember driving up to the restaurant that night thinking, man, this CFO from New York City, she's gonna be like, who the hell does this guy think he is? What does he know? He doesn't know anything. We're not gonna give him anything. Like, he doesn't add any value. And then I walked into the restaurant and this woman stood up and said, oh my God, Jaime, Casap. I can't believe it's you. I can't believe that we're talking to you. This is just incredible. And she's like, I'm a hugger. Can I hug? And then she gives me a big hug. What do all of those stories have in common? Well, what they have in common is called imposter syndrome. Something that everyone deals with. Define imposter syndrome.
Here's the definition of imposter syndrome: the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills.
If you ever felt like you don't belong, if you ever felt like a fraud, if you ever felt like, oh, any day now they're going to discover that I don't belong here and they're going to march me out of here, that's imposter syndrome. 70% of people deal with imposter syndrome to some degree or another, and sometimes it just happens once, other times it happens on a consistent basis. And it impacts everyone. This is men, women, all industries across the board. Everyone deals with this at some level in their career. There's characteristics that you can find that what I look for when I look for people that I think are dealing with imposter syndrome. They tend to be perfectionists. If they don't do something perfect, they must be a fraud. People who take things on by themselves, right? These like, I can do it. If nobody else can do this, I can do this. And the reason why they're like that is because they don't want to show anyone that they might not be able to do it. So they never ask for help, because asking for help just proves that you don't belong, that you're a fraud. And like I said, it hits all of us to some degree during our career. But the research shows us that it hits minorities even more so. One of the factors is that the lack of representation makes the minority feel like they don't belong. See, there's nobody else here that looks like me. Obviously, I don't belong here either. And there's more and more research that's showing us that there is a correlation between imposter syndrome and discrimination, between imposter syndrome and anxiety and depression in minority groups. And it starts eating at you professionally. You start doubting your credibility. You start doubting your accomplishments. You're like, well, maybe I don't belong here. And the reason you have to deal with this is because it absolutely impacts your work. You end up not taking big risks because you don't feel comfortable. You start doubting your own ability. You don't ask for help when you need to ask for help because you feel like if you ask for help, people are going to realize that you're a fraud. You procrastinate more because you believe that you can't do something, and so you hold off doing it as long as you possibly can. It impacts your ability to be creative. It impacts your ability to collaborate. It impacts your ability to critically think. You can be in a meeting where someone is spitting out some words that you don't know or some abbreviations that you don't know, but you don't say anything. You don't ask because you believe that if you ask, you're going to feel like everyone in the room is going to think, well, that guy doesn't belong here. So you sit there and stay quiet and you don't learn. And a lot of imposter syndrome is internally driven, right? It's confidence, it's self-awareness, those things. But when it comes to minorities, there's a lot of external environmental factors. For example, we know that people tend to attribute a minority's successes to their skin color and not their abilities and skills, which in turn makes them question their abilities and skills. I know that there are people that believe that I got my job at Google through some kind of affirmative action program. I've heard it. People make these microaggression assumptions. When I was in college, I was taking a 300 level communication class, and on the first paper that I wrote, I got a D, and it said, "See me." I went up to the professor, I'm like, "What's this all about? I'd never gotten a D on a paper before." And he said, "You cheated." And I'm like, what do you mean I cheated? How did I cheat? You must have cheated. There's no way that you could have written one of the best papers in the class. You cheated. Listen, admit that you cheated and I'll change your grade to a C and you just won't do it again. Just admit it. No, I didn't cheat. I wrote this. As a matter of fact, I wrote this last night. I wrote this off the top of my head. And that just sent them ballistic. It's like that Chris Rock joke where you're driving a Mercedes-Benz and you get pulled over and the cop's like, "Did you steal this car? You stole this car." And then you're sitting there thinking, hey, maybe I did steal this car. Maybe I did cheat. I must have cheated. He kept a D on the paper, and I ended up getting an A in the class because I got an A on every other paper. When he finally realized that I was writing the papers, he just had a low expectation of me, and it was never brought up again. And this isn't just for college students or young professionals. This goes on. I was in Chicago speaking at an education event on this high-powered panel. 4 of us up there, 3 of us were people of color. I was like, yeah, this is cool. Russell Simmons was sitting next to me. The Russell Simmons before all the shit went down. And then when it was my turn to get up and speak, I did my 10 minutes. I got the crowd in an uproar, and then I sat down, and the person sitting next to me, who was not a person of color, turned to me with a big grin on his face, and he's like, "Wow, you're so well spoken. That was just unbelievable. Good job." Thinking that he's paying me a compliment, but really telling me that he had very low expectations for me. So this is a real thing. It impacts everyone. It impacts minorities harder because they look around and don't see people who look like them. And then all those other factors have a role to play with imposter syndrome. It's not something that you can cure. It's something that you have to learn how to deal with on an ongoing basis. And so I jotted down a couple of ideas of things that you can do to help you deal with imposter syndrome. The first thing you need to do is just acknowledge that it's there. When it comes up, when it pops up, just acknowledge it. It's there. Deal with it. Some advice out there will tell you just pretend that you're not an imposter. That's nice to say, but kind of hard to do. Again, when you look around and nobody looks like you can't just pretend that you are not who you are. So instead, put perspective around it. So tomorrow morning, I'm going to Year Up, and I'm talking to students that are part of that program. I do this every semester, and this is what I'm going to talk to them about. That who they are and where they come from and their experiences, those things are competitive advantage. The perspective is that you do have a different point of view. You do have a unique perspective, and that's what gives you the advantage. You also need to stop comparing yourself to other people. Compare yourself to where you were a year ago or 2 years ago, and identify and highlight the progress that you've made, the accomplishments that you have. Compare yourself to you. Look at where you are. Look at where you started. Don't credit your success to luck or timing. Some people know that I grew up under terrible conditions. I grew up with a single mother in Hell's Kitchen, which was really Hell's Kitchen in the 70s and 80s, a terrible place. And I grew up on welfare and food stamps with lots of violence around me. And when I tell that story, people would ask, "My God, how did you make it out?" I would say luck. A lot of it was luck. I just got lucky, I guess. It wasn't luck. Luck's not the reason I was successful. Luck plays a role in everything, right? But luck plays a small role. Luck is not the reason I succeeded. I succeeded because I believed in myself. I succeeded because I have reality distortion field. And I can see myself accomplish things that other people can't. I succeeded despite the conditions that I grew up in because I am a hardcore optimist. I succeeded because I worked harder than everyone else. And I succeeded because I was smart. You're the reason you succeeded. The next thing you can do is join a group. I was in DC a couple weeks ago at this big wig education event, and I'm standing around at the end of one of the sessions, and I'm standing around with my group, my friends of people of color, and somehow we got on the topic of imposter syndrome, and we're telling stories, recent stories of things that we've been through. And we all realized that there isn't a group for us. There isn't something that's online where we can go talk about what we're experiencing or be vulnerable. So I'm going to be launching a group on LinkedIn to do just that. So I'm planning on doing that next week. Find a group of people that you can connect with who are dealing with similar situations. They don't have to be from the same industry. They don't have to be from the same company. Just people that are like you, that are similar to you, who are also dealing with imposter syndrome. The point is that you want to connect with people who can relate to what you're going through. The next thing that you can do is find a mentor. The advice out there is just find a mentor in any industry, any space. I don't agree. Find a mentor in your space that you can reach out to and say, hey, can I talk to you about your experiences and talk to you about what I'm experiencing and get some guidance from you? Make sure you're documenting your accomplishments. Like, one of the pieces of advice that I've seen out there suggests that you should take people's praise and feedback and create a little folder with little notes that people send you. And that's fine, you can do that, but I don't let other people validate my greatness. You know when you do something great. You know when you accomplish something. Write that down, document it, put it on video if you have to. Don't leave it up to others to validate you. You have to learn how to validate yourself. And then I saw this tip that was just so off that I had to make this video. And the tip was, fake it until you make it. Don't do that. If you're faking it, you're not gonna grow. You're not gonna learn. You grow through people helping you. If you're faking it, then everyone's just gonna think you should know how to do something. And then when you can't do it, they'll start questioning your work ethic. They'll start questioning your abilities. When you fail at something, when you make a mistake, it won't be because you're learning and growing. It'll be because you must be bad at what you do. If I fake that I'm a brilliant three-point shooter and then I get on a court and shoot 0 for 34, I don't know why anybody would let me take 34 shots. People are gonna identify that I'm a fraud, or at the very least, they're gonna say that I am completely out of touch with my abilities and skill set. And then the last tip is to pay it forward. And here I'm talking to two different groups. I'm talking to young people. When you finally make it, when you know how to deal with imposter syndrome, pay it forward. Go get other people and bring them up behind you. You are a pioneer whether you like it or not. And for those of you who are like me, who are successful, you have to be available as a mentor, absolutely. But you need to do more than that. You need to be what I call a proactive mentor. You're dealing with a community that doesn't ask for help, who don't know how to reach out to you, who don't know how to build social capital. You need to go find those people and pull them up. I'm currently mentoring 2 people through imposter syndrome who never came to me to tell me they had imposter syndrome. I identified it, so you need to do that as well. And if you're dealing with imposter syndrome right now and you've identified it based on what you just heard, reach out to me. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me on Twitter. If I can help, I'll be glad to help. If I can connect you with people in your space that may be able to help, I'll do that as well. Because there's absolutely no reason that you can't find ways to deal with imposter syndrome. You have to be proactive as well in dealing with it. All right, that's it. Hope you guys found something helpful. If you have ideas or if you have ways that you deal with imposter syndrome, jot them down below so people can learn. And please share this with those that you think are dealing with imposter syndrome. Show them that there are ways to deal with it. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you guys in the next video. All right, what do we say no to?
Impostor Syndrome!
All right, everybody wave.